Good afternoon. My name is Neil Sutton. I'm the editor of SP&T News, and I will be the host and moderator for today's session. Our webinar today is How Will Consumer Technology Disrupt the Commercial Market? The webinar will take approximately 45 minutes with an additional 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. If you have a question during the webinar, there's a little question dialog box on the right of your screen. If you record a question there, we'll get to as many of those questions as we can at the end of the session. I would actually like to introduce our speaker for today. Our speaker is Joe Young. Joe is the Senior Director, Cloud and Enterprise Solutions for G4S Secure Integration. In his current role at G4S, Joe leads the company's connected vision to integrate hardware, software, services, robotics, and security personnel in a unified offering. G4S is also the sponsor for today's webinar, and we're very grateful for their support. G4S employs more than 585,000 people globally, with just over 8,500 people in Canada. G4S offers risk consulting services, investigative services, systems integration services, and guarding services. It also manufactures security products, including AMAG Symmetry Access Control and Video Management Solutions, as well as Cache 360, a cache management solution for retailers. That concludes my introductory remarks. I'd now like to turn the session over to Joe.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for the introduction. So, consumerization. If we look at just the overall definition of consumerization, I'll reference a definition from Gartner, who's a world leader in American research, and they're an advisory firm providing information technology related to insight for IT and other business leaders across the world. So Gartner classifies it as consumerization is the specific impact that consumer-originated technologies can have on enterprises. It reflects how enterprises will be affected by and can take advantage of new technologies and models that originate and develop in the consumer space rather than in the enterprise IT sector, or in our case, in the physical security enterprise space. So consumerization is not a strategy, or it's not something to be adopted. Consumerization can be embraced and it must be dealt with, but it cannot be stopped. So I'm going to repeat that last sentence because I think this one's important. So consumerization is not a strategy or something to be adopted. Consumerization can be embraced and it must be dealt with, but it cannot be stopped. So what we're going to cover in today as I progress through the slides, when I look at the agenda, we're going to cover a few different things. We're going to go over what I call the 3 dimensions of disruption. I'm going to take you through a day in a life of what it's like inside of a smart home or a connected home. And then I'm going to call out, I have 18 areas of interest to watch. So it's like the top 18 for 2018 that we're going to go over, key areas to kind of watch and how that's going to impact our space. And then we're going to go over some general insights for manufacturers and integrators. And then we're going to open it up and have some fun with some Q&A at the end. So before I get into the 3 dimensions of disruption, I recently attended the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, also known as CES. For those of you who haven't been to this show, you'll know that CES it's one of the largest trade shows in the world, with over 170,000 people that attended this year attended in 2018 this year. So it's a global stage where next generation innovations are introduced within the market. It's basically kind of it's a proving ground for innovators in breakthrough technologies. We see a ton of major companies that across the planet that participate in CES in some form of fashion. Companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft. Apple's an interesting one. While Apple doesn't particularly present their products that fall within the Apple ecosystem are all over the place. And it was one of the biggest trends that we saw this year from there. So you'll see things like technology from audio, vehicle technology, wireless to drones, AR or augmented reality and virtual reality, and a bunch of different kind of IoT sensors that are out there. So we're seeing advances in the consumer technology space around televisions, cameras, PCs, video game consoles, mobile phones, smart homes, connected homes, and we're going to kind of see what the impact is, or the impact could potentially be for the commercial security market. And what I like to do today is kind of talk about how I believe the latest advances in these technology will continue to drive innovation and disrupt certain things that we do in our space today. So I'm a big believer that every industry gets disrupted. I think there's people picking away at the edges today, but I think we also need to take a step back and figure out, how do we disrupt ourselves before somebody else does? So that brings me into the 3 dimensions of disruption that I look at. I look at things around emerging technologies, business model enablers, and then exponential adoption curves. So as excitement and panic about opportunities and threats emerge, or threats of emerging technologies kind of spread into the boardrooms across the world, it's worth considering that it's not just the technologies themselves, which is kind of why we have this triangle here. It's not the technologies that are just disruptive. And if we take a step back and we look at what happened in the year 2000 with the technology bubble, it kind of taught us that technologies themselves, they're vulnerable, right, to issues of scaling and adoption. So when I look at the emerging technologies, I highlighted a couple interesting ones that are on there. Blockchains and smart contracts, AI, AR, advanced robotics, AR for augmented reality, and the Internet of Things. This is just a couple. We probably internally, I have a list of probably about 20 different emerging technologies that we're keeping an eye on. As we shift over into the business model enablers, we look at things like cloud services. So access to flexible cloud services like AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure, they're negating the need for large servers on premise, helping kind of drive a lot of compute to the cloud and having us bring different services to market incredibly fast compared to what it used to take beforehand for us to, acquire a bunch of servers, implement the servers, manage the software, and kind of go from there. We're seeing a lot around the miniaturization of sensors, which is really driving that bottom left emerging technology of IoT or the Internet of Things. We look at compute power and low-cost computing, and overall, we look at, Moore's law has seen cost computing decrease hugely while the processing power has increased drastically. Even taking it a step further and looking at the virtualization of GPUs that are happening. The API economy, the availability around open architectures and APIs. Crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is an interesting one. So it gives us the early availability of capital from crowdfunding sites. Everyone's kind of heard of Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and there's a few other ones that are out there that allow startups the ability to fund projects to the point of a minimum viable product. We start to look at things like open source. So we're seeing a big transformation in the value shifting from the product to the data, encouraging software vendors to make their software more open to create this ecosystem so you can create data lakes and things like that so we can run some advanced analytics. And then you're going to see some stuff around freemium that kind of impacts our space. Companies like, even on the consumer space of companies like Dropbox, who give away their services for free, but overall they get in there, create some stickiness, and enable some different products and services from an upsell standpoint. So previously, uptake of the new technologies was kind of limited by the speed in which target markets were prepared to accept these new solutions, and by where target consumers sat behaviorally between early adopters and laggards. If you looked at the traditional bell curve. So up on the screen, you'll see kind of where we see things going now. So the intersection and interaction of emerging technologies, so what we see on the left-hand side, innovative new business models, what we see on the right-hand side, and the exponential adoption curve is leading to large-scale disruption of industries at an unprecedented or staggering rate. So beforehand, it used to be a slow curve that went up, but now when we look at this triangle from the three dimensions of disruption, it's becoming incredibly, the technology is coming faster and faster, and people are adopting sooner and sooner. So a good example could be around just traditional self-driving trucks. So if we look, Tesla launched some self-driving trucks. While the economics for an autonomous truck are compelling, it's still pretty expensive per truck. So the adoption rates are considered by the economics of requiring purchasers to have the appropriate levels of free cash flow. So the adoption curve is kind of gentle and shallow. So if we look at other people who've come into this space, we start to see retrofit kits for existing trucks, and the barrier to entry is all of a sudden lower. So it's going to cause a steep adoption rate due to increased affordability in bringing that solution to the market. So it's becoming apparent that the critical driver of disruption is the speed at which consumers or business adopt a new product and service, and really that perfect storm of emerging tech, new business models to disrupt it quickly, and subsequent exponential adoption means that organizations must start to get more agile and be able to respond and participate. So this slide it's an interesting one. It's not meant to be totally tailored to the consumer space, but it's a big look at, I guess, the enterprise physical security space as a whole. And then we're going to go through some different areas and kind of walk you through how this all ties together, how this brings in the consumer technology space, how it impacts the commercial security space. But this is kind of an overall good general framework for us to look at. So the smart house. So bringing things back to the consumer space, let me paint you a picture of a day in a life of being in a smart home. So close your eyes, and I'm going to take you on this journey of what it's like to live in a smart home. Now, 95% of what I'm about to explain is true, and 5% is kind of false, but I'll leave it up to your imagination to kind of figure out which one's which. So my house doesn't face east, which restricts the amount of sunlight I kind of get in my room. So 10 minutes before my alarm is set to go off in the morning, a smart light turns on in my room. But it's not just any smart light, it's smart light that adapts to color and then automatically sets the hue of the light to the color of what would replicate the sun rising to the closest point. And then 10 minutes later, my alarm goes off. So I wake up, I say good morning to my virtual assistant, and it tells me what's the weather today, top news stories, traffic conditions, and the time it will take me to get to my first appointment because it has access to my calendar. In parallel, my assistant starts to open my blinds, turns on the kitchen lights, sets my smart thermostat to the perfect temperature that my wife and I like in the house, and it starts the coffee pot, starts to brew the coffee that I prepared the night before, and then the morning playlist that my wife and I like to have starts to play throughout the house. This is without touching any buttons. This is just me talking to a virtual assistant to do this. So once I'm showered and dressed for the day and ready to go downstairs, I head down, start to have some breakfast with my wife. Since we were expecting snow last night, I asked my virtual assistant, show me the driveway camera so I could see if I need to shovel. It automatically pulls the camera up on my TV, and much to my surprise, the weather team actually forecasted the weather right, and we did get some snow, but it wasn't quite enough to go out and shovel. So I finish eating breakfast and I tell my virtual assistant that I'm leaving for the day. And it sets the temperature to the temperature that I predetermined of when I leave the house. It turns off the lights, closes the blinds, turns off my TV, disarms my alarm so I can walk out, unlocks the front door, opens the garage door, and then it summons my electric car. So let me pause here, because you probably think I'm bragging about a state-of-the-art, incredibly expensive home automation setup. It's actually the complete opposite. What I'm describing to you is the experience that can be built with an off-the-shelf, simple, do-it-yourself Apple HomeKit setup with devices bought from a local electronics store. And the prices are unbelievable. You can get an Apple TV for $179 US, light switches for 30, light bulbs for 15, thermostats for 150, and a front door lock for 200. So best of all, the software that powers this ecosystem, completely free. And it delivers a seamless experience with the entire Apple ecosystem that I talked about, controlled all by my voice. So think about that. I have this unbelievable, fully connected experience. I live at home, all powered by my voice, all do it yourself, all incredibly cost-effective devices. So to carry on with the experience, I get in my car, I start to head to my first appointment, and as I pull out of the driveway, I have a geofence set around my house, so my vehicle and my phone know I'm driving away from the home, it automatically arms the alarm, locks the locks, and shuts the garage door. So as I mentioned, it summons my electric car. So this isn't any normal electric car, and the reason it's not a normal electric car is because where I'm about to take you. So many of you are probably wondering, why is this a DeLorean? And why is this not a Tesla? Why is it not a Model 3 or a Model X or a Model S? So we need the DeLorean because I'm going to take you to what I consider an average client's office. So here we go. We're on our way. We pull up to the average client's office. And it's like we step back in time 10 years. Now, obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit because everyone knows that a DeLorean doesn't actually travel back in time. But if it did, probably a handful of us would go back to 2010 and buy some Bitcoin for 10 cents. And depending on how wild the crypto market is each week, we'd all be millionaires right now. So I park my DeLorean next to the horse and buggy and I make my way to the entrance. The front door is propped open because everyone forgets their badges at home. I get to the reception area, there's no receptionist, there's no intercom, and there's a sign that says, please sign in and use the phone to reach your contact. So I sign the paper logbook, pick up the phone and dial the extension to let my host know that I've arrived. And when the host comes to get me, I'm given a general badge that just so happens to have access to all the doors 24/7, not really secure. So we sit in the conference room to have our meeting, and of course the conference room is 20 degrees cooler than the rest of the office. So my host leaves and tries to find the right thermostat to control the temperature in that room. The host returns, and then we have our typical talk around designing, a state-of-the-art risk-based kind of security program. So the point of the time travel analogy is to show you how different the experience is, how different it is from living in this connected home to how different it is when you actually go to an average person's office. Now, this isn't every client. There's a lot of clients that are very progressive and think differently and challenge integrators and manufacturers to build kind of next generation security programs. But I'd say by and far, not everyone is there. And the reality is that the next generation of employees are going to expect that connected experience, and the next generation of chief security officers and chief information security officers are going to be challenged with making it a reality. So over the next few slides, we're going to go over a bit of information on key areas to watch. As I mentioned, the top 18 for 2018, and then I'm going to share some thoughts on what does this mean for integrators, kind of give some insights, and then we're going to wrap it up with some Q&A. So with that, I'm going to shift into one of the first trends that we're looking at. So knowledge. Knowledge is probably one of the most important ones to me, and I really categorize knowledge in two different areas. I look at knowledge as in client knowledge and then your knowledge. So as I mentioned, knowledge is key to establishing trust and credibility with your client. Remember that. Knowledge is key to establishing trust and credibility with your client. Clients are becoming smarter and smarter. And the reason they're becoming smarter and smarter is because the information is available. It's everywhere. It's on the web. Every manufacturer has websites. There's forums. There's LinkedIn's. There's all kinds of events that are going on. Social media. There's word of mouth. And it makes it really, really easy for the clients to understand concepts. But for the most part, they lack the underlying details of how to make this come to life, some of the challenges that could come with it. So that whole connected experience that I talked about, if not done right, it's a cyber disaster. So there's going to be a lot of things that we have to help the clients with. We have to help educate them and educate them on the details and some of the pros and cons of balancing some of this. So first one was client knowledge. Second category is going to be around your knowledge. Know your trends, because you never know when they will come up. A good example of this is we were talking to a really large bank on Wall Street, and we were talking about an enterprise deployment of security officers, some corporate risk stuff that we were doing, an enterprise access control, visitor management, and identity access management system. And then there was, I think, 5 of us in the room from our team, and there was about 12 from the client side. And then the CTO turns to me and says, "What are you guys doing in blockchain?" Completely irrelevant to any of the conversation that we were having. But what the client was actually doing was testing my knowledge to to make sure that they were picking a partner that could not only help them today, but help them in the future. As they've been tracking blockchain and smart contracts and seeing how it's disrupting the financial space, they wanted to get our thoughts on, A, what are we doing internally about it? And then what is happening in the security industry about it? I'm very fortunate that we have a really forward-thinking team that's here, and we have some people that invest in some cryptocurrency. So we've been talking about blockchain for probably about the past 8 months. So we were really prepared to have the conversation, and we kind of walked through some stuff, some pros and cons. We talked about how it's going to disrupt a lot of industries, and we talked about the 4 pillars of blockchain. We went on, and at the end state of this is we got the customer's business, and we got the customer's business because A, we could deliver everything that the customer was looking for, but we established that trust and credibility, and they knew that we weren't just trying to sell them a widget, or we weren't just trying to sell them a service. We were going to sell them a program, and along with that program came all this knowledge, so we can help the client be nimble and adapt to all these different emerging trends that may come their way in the future. So moving on, the user experience. To me, this is what I would call like the secret sauce. So most of what we're going to cover today needs to be considered when delivering the user experience. So what's happening in the home and how manufacturers and integrators are responding to it. We have this concept around unification, and everyone wants to own it. So I'm seeing a tremendous challenge of a lot of different technologies coming out, but they're not coming together. There's certain manufacturers that are out there that build some really cool unified platforms and kind of bring some things together. You see things like PSIMs that have been around for 10, 15 years, and the goal behind that is to bring it all together. The future state is going to be just building products that all work together. So if we look at the consumer space, an interesting thing to me around the user experience is around credit cards. If we look at, 5 years ago, everyone had credit cards, and you carry around 5, 10 credit cards in a wallet, and you'd take it out, swipe your card, enter or insert your card, use the chip pin, and kind of go from there. Now everything's shifted digital. Now I use my credit card, but it's stored in a digital form inside of a secure chip on my iPhone, and I use Apple Pay for everything. So it's the same card, it's just being used in a different way, and it delivers an unbelievable experience. So when I walk into a retailer and I go to buy something, I double tap up one button on my phone, and there's my credit card. Authenticates with my face, I pay, and I leave. So it's an unbelievable experience. So some of the challenges we're going to see in our space is delivering these services, but focusing on the end user experience. If I look at Bluetooth credentials in the physical security space today, I see a lot of mobile apps being built around Bluetooth credentials and just overall digital credentials. The challenge is I haven't really seen too many that are built natively into the operating system that give you that same experience that you have in the consumer space of using your credit card. Now you have to, walk up, you have to unlock your phone, find the mobile app, open the mobile app, present the mobile app to the reader. The reader authenticates and lets you in. It's way too many steps. So we're going to see a big push to how do you deliver that same experience on the consumer side over the commercial side. So just my thoughts on some of the Bluetooth credentials and some of the impacts that we've seen, specifically one of the drivers being what we've seen in the credit card side. So as we look at consumption, driving towards multi-platform solutions, people consume things differently today. Obviously, everything we've seen in the past probably 2 years is cloud first, mobile first. If we look at the number of smartphone users, by the end of this year, there's going to be 2.53 billion smartphone users. So now let's compare that to PC. So PC usage is actually down, and the average person uses a PC 34 hours per month. And we've seen a staggering uptick in the amount of hours that an individual is on a mobile device, which is 87 hours a month. 34 on a PC, 87 hours on a mobile device. And if we look at if you go to Statistica, there's some really good charts that kind of show you the hours within the day and when people are utilizing these devices. It's before they go to work and after they come home from work, they're on their mobile device. But when we bring them to work, we shift them to a PC. And there's a good reason for it, right? There's certain office productivity suites that work better, screen size and real estate, things like that. Just the overall experience may be better on the PC side, but we're going to have to see more and more drive to the mobile space and us building applications natively on the mobile side. So app downloads, 352 billion mobile apps downloads predicted by 2021. App revenues, almost at $189 billion by 2020. So we're seeing the drive in the consumer space. We got to catch up to it in the commercial security space. So users want the same content, they just may want to consume it in a different way. A good example from this on the consumer side is going to be cable TV. Traditionally, we talk about cord cutting. And if you're not familiar with cord cutting is taking your TV provider, essentially canceling it, and then adopting a over-the-air antenna to watch local 2579, whatever the channels might be in your local region. It's shifting to that. The lines are getting a little bit blurred on what people are calling cord cutting now. So the next generation of people that are calling themselves cord cutters, they're just delivering the content, they're consuming the content in a different way. People are shifting to streaming services. You're not cutting the cord and going to an over-the-air antenna. You're just kind of shifting how you want to consume it. You want to get rid of your cable provider because they charge you a ton of money for the stations that you want to watch. You want to get rid of the rental fee for your box. You want to shift to another box and you just want to stream it there. So same content, different ways to consume it. Voice. I already walked you through kind of what it looked like in the day in a life of a smart home or a connected home. Virtual assistants are already the norm at the home level. We look at Alexa, we look at Google, we look at Siri, we look at Cortana. They're all over the place. I see them more and more coming into the enterprise space, or people just put them in their offices, connect them to the Wi-Fi, and they're using them with or without IT's permission. So we see we'll see a big shift, and some things that our organization's kind of keeping an eye on is using AI to create virtual partners, or the concept around Hey Security, to where you can ask your virtual assistant questions related to security, or you can ask your virtual partner, which is powered by a kind of a threaded chat powered by a threaded chat bot on the back end. You can ask that that virtual partner to query enterprise systems on the back end. So once again, what we're seeing in the consumer space around voice, we will see become a big part of the commercial security space in the future. So location-based services. If we look at the concepts around beacons, RTLS, or real-time locationing systems or services, asset tracking, in the home, it knows where I'm at based on, you know, $10 beacons, battery-powered beacons that could be around the house. It knows where I'm at. It knows the Bluetooth signal in between my mobile device and the closest Apple TV. Kind of has an idea where I'm at in the house, and I could do things based on the location. I talked about when I left my home, how the geofence was able to trigger certain things. Same concept when I come home. If I come home, I enter that geofence, maybe I want to turn on the lights, start the TV, start the fireplace, turn on the sprinkler, turn off the sprinkler, open the garage door. The sky's the limit. You can automate whatever you want when it comes to location-based services. When I look at that experience shifting into the consumer space, I look at hoteling. You walk into a shared office and there's cubicles everywhere, and you have the ability to walk up to that cubicle, open up a mobile app, and say you want that cubicle. And then all of a sudden that cubicle is personalized to you. Your phone number is pushed down there, the internet's turned on, you have the ability to authenticate there, the light's set to the way you want it, and the heat within that specific location is tailored to what you've put within your profile. So we're gonna see a lot of interesting things coming around hoteling and location-based services around heating, lighting, and additional services. So we talked about some interesting ones: knowledge, user experience, consumption, voice, location-based services, privacy. How do you do this all when it becomes, when you're sharing a bunch of information? This is an interesting one between the consumer and the commercial space. On the consumer space, consumers do it every single day without even knowing how much information they're sharing on the back end. The second you ask and you bring up the awareness in the commercial space, everyone raises a red flag and says, I don't want Big Brother watching me. I don't want all this data. I don't want you to track me. I don't want you to know every step, every move that I make, but at the same point, you want that experience. So I think the future of what we're going to see here is a lot of opt-in models for everything. So do as much at the edge as possible. Call it fog computing. Try to do as much processing on the edge as possible. Send very little up to the cloud for processing. Look at full end-to-end encryption for everything. And we're going to have to educate the commercial space on, if you want that predictive experience, you have to be willing to contribute. So as I talked earlier, when I talked about the experience of when I woke up, I asked kind of how what's the plan for the day, and my virtual assistant tells me weather because it knows my location. It tells me how long it's going to take me to get to the office because it knows where my office is, and it's looking at traffic patterns, and it knows exactly where I'm at that point. If I wake up on certain days, it's going to tell me how long is it going to take to get to the gym, because it knows I drive to the gym 5 days a week at this specific time. So it's automatically going to tell you all these things. So there's an interesting line that we have to walk between, we have to be willing to give up some data privacy in order to get that seamless experience. So as we shift into technology, as I mentioned earlier, I attended CES this year. It's 8 times bigger than ISC. If everyone joining is familiar with ISC, it's 2.5 million square feet versus 300,000 square feet. And it was interesting. This is probably the first year that I saw a few camera manufacturers from our space that were in attendance. Similar kind of technologies that we see at ISC or ASIS, a lot of robotics, a lot of drones. I probably saw more robotics and drones there than I did at ASIS. We look at companies like Ring, who's traditionally known for their doorbells, launching alarm systems. So consumer technologies creeping into the SMB mid-market, probably not the enterprise space, but we're going to see some bleed over, and we'll see it impact kind of how we do some things and how we think about it. Smart homes were obviously a hot trend. IoT was everywhere. AI was everywhere. Google was there promoting their Hey Google. We saw interesting products from companies like Netgear, their Arlo Pro 2 line, some interesting things around wireless technology when it comes to cameras. Really interesting product from a company called Abode, which has a do-it-yourself kind of platform that you can implement, and you can opt in for professional monitoring. So it's the do-it-yourself model. You opt in for professional monitoring, and you can add a bunch of IoT devices. So really interesting blend of consumer technology coming over into the SMB space and providing some optional on-demand services. As I mentioned, wire-free was a big trend. Who else was out there? Nest. Nest was a really interesting one. So Nest now has a business offering. And now I've already met with a few different monitoring centers that are monitoring Nest cameras on a commercial level. So Nest is known for their thermostats. They're known for their Nest Protect carbon and smoke detectors. Now they're known for, they got a doorbell coming out. They have a bunch of different kind of accessories that are coming out into this Nest ecosystem. They have an alarm system coming out right now. But it was really interesting to meet with a couple partners. I guess I'd say some are competitors, some are partners. We do a good job of creating kind of this ecosystem of people that we chat with across the industry, just to have a kind of keep a pulse on what's going on out there. But yeah, Nest has made its way into the consumers, or the commercial space when it comes to remote monitoring from the video standpoint. And the Nest cameras have voice down or voice challenge capability. So really interesting things we're seeing there. Some of the challenges, I mentioned earlier that customers know a good amount, but they don't know the details. Technology lifecycle is probably one of the details that the customer's lacking today. They like the technology, they like the experience, they just don't know. You can't put that consumer display inside your security operations center because it's not rated to run for 24/7. So understanding the usage, the appropriate usage of that technology, and understanding, more importantly, the warranties from the manufacturers, because a lot of manufacturers have T's and C's written into their warranties that if you take this consumer product that you buy off the shelf and you try to stick it in a commercial application, we're going to void the warranty. So definitely something to educate yourselves on, to look at not only the technologies, but kind of behind the scenes technology lifecycle and how do you manage the lifecycle of certain technology for a client. Internet of Things, or IoT, probably one of the biggest disruptors that's been around. IoT's been around for a long time. We're seeing a lot of traction in the commercial space, especially over the past probably 2 years, 2.5 years. While it's one of the most disruptive, it's also one of the most scariest if it's not done properly. So we're seeing a ton of miniaturization of these cost-effective sensors that you can deploy everywhere. So traditionally, it used to be you had to have a super expensive building management system. You'd have to put in all this stuff. Now, you could put in a gateway and you could connect a bunch of sensors that monitor your entire building for a fraction of the cost. Security, cybersecurity, locking things down properly, hardening things. We'll touch on security in a few other areas here today, but IoT is definitely an interesting one that we see impacting the space. Everything is connected. If we go back to the home experience, your washer and dryer are connected nowadays. Your refrigerator's connected, your coffee maker. Everything in your home is going to have an IP address, slowly making its way into our space today. So next, we look at things around being proprietary. So either we need to adopt or create an open architecture with the ability to opt in. We see certain companies out there like I don't want to say companies, but standards out there like ONVIF that's helping kind of guide the way around video and access. We see many manufacturers tend to lock down features unless it's used with their own software. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you know who pays for it, or you know who suffers? It's the client. So while the manufacturer locks things down, if the integrator doesn't understand how to deliver that experience and sell that entire ecosystem, the customer suffers in the long run. So we have to do a good job of challenging manufacturers to be open. Try not to build things as proprietary as possible, but if you do build proprietary, which is sometimes fine, adopt some best practices and adopt some standards from things like ONVIF. Google, a really interesting kind of concept around Google, they're different. Their concept is be different but work together. And if I look at things around even AWS, Amazon's a really interesting one in the form of all the Alexa skills that are out there. So maybe as we see a transformation to pure web-based or cloud-based services, we're going to see the ability to go from web to web and essentially create commercial versions of skills that can be done in between them. So a lot of things we're going to see around the proprietary space. Implementation. Do-it-yourself trend. This trend is really just the average user who wants to own as much as the solution as possible. They want the option for professional monitoring, professional remote services, plug and play types of things. Give me the ability, similar to the home experience or HomeKit, I want to be able to scan a code and go in and add some stuff. So we have to get to a point where we're done over-engineering, over-complicating implementations. How do we get in this do-it-yourself kind of approach? And with that becomes availability. So this is a really interesting one. This is really disruptive from the consumer side. How quickly can you do a site walk and turn around a quote to do the install? Because Amazon's offering free pro services to do the same thing without a site walk. So they sell millions of widgets, and now they're offering free design services. We look at like what's happening in Best Buy and the Geek Squad. So retail stores allow clients to kind of touch and feel the products before ordering them online. And at what point does a customer say, well, why should I call so-and-so to come out? I have to wait weeks for this. I could just order this. I can order this Nest thermostat from Amazon. I could order these cameras from Amazon. I can go to the local store and pick them up. So what we're going to be challenged with in our space is being incredibly responsive and being professional. I personally have lost some really interesting opportunities to Amazon, to a customer who said all the right things and said they wanted this enterprise solution, but in return they just wanted the lowest cost item and ended up acquiring some things from Amazon. So system health and availability, almost every sensor that I talked about in my house has health monitoring native to it. So over the past 2 years, this has probably been a big trend in our space. Manufacturers tend to support it, their solutions natively, while integrators are trying to figure out ways to, how do I be agnostic and manage, sorry, skipped ahead one. How do I how do I be agnostic and manage health monitoring across all of the assets that I deployed for a customer? And then with that, once we get into the remote monitoring, what do we do with that system health information? Do we have the ability to remotely support and service the clients? I think the home automation space is doing a fantastic job in this. Companies like Control4, they do a great job of they have a backpack appliance, they call it, that you can quickly deploy out there, and it helps the channel partners go in, manage and monitor things, look at system health and availability, gives you the ability to remote in and fix some things. If something's wrong, you eliminate that informational truck roll and you're able to send a technician out to the right place at the right time with the right part. So getting to this remote service and support, I think a lot of integrators have done a great job. We're going to see more and more push to make this just a norm, just a part of your service contract. I talked earlier about some on-demand professional monitoring. Given the ability, and this isn't for everyone, right? Because certain customers need UL certifications and they have to have things wrapped into their insurance. They have to have 24/7 monitoring, and we have to do open and close schedules and all this other fun stuff. But we're seeing a need for, I'd say, the average organization who they don't want to be locked into monthly fees, and they just want to, hey, let me pay for professional monitoring when I want to pay for it. Happening on a daily basis in the consumer space today. End user control. As we shift to the end user having more autonomy to be able to control and configure and create, macros and automations and things on their end, it kind of ties back to the do-it-yourself solutions. The tech-savvy clients don't want to feel like they're locked down. If I want to make a change, I don't want to have to call out the service guy and have him make these changes every single time. I want to be able to go in and have autonomy to make those changes on my mobile device, the web client, whatever it might be. I want some autonomy to make some changes myself. Security. Security is a really challenging one. So as I mentioned earlier, if the home space is not done properly, it can be a massive, what they call as a botnet for the future. So we've all heard the stories of connected washers, dryers, and refrigerators creating botnets and doing denial of service attacks from the IT side. The more and more IoT becomes mainstream in this space, the more and more this becomes a concern. There's a lot of people deploying IoT today that are new to it. They don't get it. It's really hard. I'd say beef up your cyber capabilities, understand what you're good at, pull in some different resources, leverage the manufacturers, create hardening guides around if you deploy this, build in cyber capabilities into your preventative maintenance program, because that do-it-yourself experience and that home experience and that ease of use, if it comes into our space and is not done properly, it's going to wreak havoc in the future. So we have to be proactive about this one. And then pricing models. Who ever thought the day that you can go buy a Volvo today for a subscription? You can buy a car, a brand new 2018 XC40 as a subscription, includes all wear and tear, all insurance, all services, roadside assistance, grab whatever color you want, whatever functions and features, X amount of dollars per month. We're seeing a lot, I mean, even the subscription-based services from cable providers, the streaming music services from everybody. We're seeing the need for subscription-based moving forward into our future. So it's going to be an interesting time for some pricing models going in the future. Some people still want CapEx, some people want OpEx, some people want the predictability around OpEx. The challenge is going to be figuring out the flexibility and balancing your clients' needs and delivering them that financial wrapper around the products and services that you're going to be delivering them to that meets their needs. So with that was the top 18 for 2018. And I'm going to shift over to 1 second. Let's shift over to some insights. So insights to me is just some basic things around what does this mean for manufacturers? What does this mean for integrators? And what are some of the overarching themes across both? So manufacturers, in 2 to 5 years, what we see today in the home will be expected as the norm. You have to find a way to balance your core offering, but figure out ways to be disruptive and build things differently. I'm not saying don't walk away from your core business, just keep an eye on it, keep a pulse on the industry, and make sure you're taking care of the customers today, but you're building towards the future as well. I challenge manufacturers to create end user communities. And this is big. So create channel user communities, and that's invite all your channels in, listen to their comments, listen to their feedback, and then more importantly, listen to the voice of your customer. Create personalized events that have end users there. Don't let salespeople in. Don't let other channel partners in. Listen to the voice of the customer, because what they tell you is obviously the most important. If they tell the integrator, it may or may not make it back to the manufacturer in the same fashion that the story was told. So we always hear stories, and then by the time it goes through 3 people, the story is completely different. Challenge the manufacturers, look at the voice of the customers, and create some channel user communities. Listen and embrace feedback. Try to build native to the mobile operating system, as we see a lot of trends shifting towards mobile. Try to balance privacy, security, and user experience. As I look at the integrator side, use knowledge to become the trusted advisor. Be the professor of technology. What would Joe do? That's ultimately the goal that I leave with every meeting. I want to have the conversations and solve business problems for customers. But if something comes up that the client doesn't know what to do, I want them to say, what would G4S do? What would Joe do? So that's the goal behind that. Understand that connected experience, sell value, and don't be a widget pusher. So don't just sell boxes. Try to sell value across your organization. Try to stop selling systems that don't connect to each other. So when you build things and you create this unified vision for the customer, make sure you're picking products and services that seamlessly connect into each other, and help clients create that vision. Help them with road mapping. Help them understand their current state of where they're at, the future state, and then help them develop that roadmap to get from current to future. And then understand the generational differences based on customers. There's specific customers that I talked to today that, while they love this technology, their clientele are probably not the best people to be utilizing cutting edge types of products and services. So obviously understand all of this, understand all the information, but then know who the information is relevant for. And if I look at the overarching themes, invest in a diverse team to lead your innovation and technology vision. Bring in resources that live technical lives at home. Budget for a lab and provide technology allowances for select members of your team to use technology in home and understand the experience and what to expect from it. Lab versus daily usage are 2 completely different things. We see a lot of organizations who build labs, but when you actually live it, touch and feel and utilize the technology, the products and services on a daily basis, now. And then we have HomePod. I personally am all bought in on the Apple ecosystem. I own a HomePod now. It delivers that seamless experience to me. But the takeaway from that is they weren't the first to come out with the product, but they're taking a different stance. They're focusing on audio, and they're focusing on more of the Apple ecosystem experience. So the point is, you don't have to be the first one to be out there. And with that, I'm going to shift it back to Neil to open it up. We got about 10 minutes, a little bit over 10 minutes left for some questions. So I'll open it up to you, Neil.
Great, thanks, Joe. That's great. We really appreciate that presentation. Yeah, so once again, as Joe said, we are taking questions now. So if you would like to record your question, go ahead and do that now. We got about 10 minutes, so we can take some time for that. Maybe one thing we'll get to right away is a very common question we hear is how to integrate IoT devices more safely into the network. There seems to be an awful lot of concerns around a potential for hacking and cybersecurity and things like that, and it seems to be a real question these days.
Yeah, so integration of IoT devices inside of there's a whole. I mean, that's a 30-minute answer for that one. So my short answer is going to be spend some time, look at the different IoT manufacturers, do due diligence on where these devices are actually built and procured. Make sure there's no backdoors to some type of mothership and it's selling data off to somebody else. Spend your time looking at the partners, do the vetting on the vendor management side, but then also work with the manufacturers to say, if we take this step forward and build an IoT product or service, how do we create hardening guides? How do we isolate it? How do you make sure you have cyber insurance to back you and protect you in case something does go wrong? So there's a couple different moving parts and pieces around probably developing IoT properly. There's a lot of really good manufacturers that are out there. The big players are all in the space now, the Amazons, the Googles, the AWS. They all have IoT capabilities and platforms. That might be one of the recommendations that I'd start with is do some research, look some things up, talk to some major manufacturers, and do some due diligence and kind of compare some of the different manufacturers that are out there.
Okay, thank you. We just got a question about the session itself. Yes, if you've registered for this session, you will be able to access it at a later time. You can go back to the registration page where you logged in, and you can access it there. And for anybody else that didn't register ahead of time, you can register after the fact and tune into the session once it's been recorded. I believe we're going to post that 24 hours from now. Another common question we do get is what sort of training or updates should integrators and installers be looking for in order to stay on top of this technology we're talking about today?
Yeah, so from the consumer side, so I guess it's a few different things. So from the consumer side, as I mentioned, one of those takeaways on the last side is invest, build a team, build an at-home experience, go to your local store, buy some things, build an Apple house, build a Google house, build a an AWS powered house, build a bit of a smart home and play around with some gadgets, have some hands-on experience so you can understand the experience with that. If you need some guidance, please take down my email and reach out to me, and we can definitely point you in the right direction. Work with manufacturers. Manufacturers should be your best friend from the integrator side, at least. Manufacturer side, please reach out to us and we can have some conversations. But if you're an integrator, reach out to some progressive and forward-thinking manufacturers that can help you on that journey. Build some labs, build some at-home kind of environments so you can get that hands-on feel.
Okay. We did get a question about, I guess, using backup systems or how should IoT products be enabled to back up?
How should IoT? I'm not sure I understand the question.
I might ask the person that submitted that question just to clarify a little bit. Maybe just moving on to another question. We talked a bit about things like Alexa and Google Home and things like that. What sort of, maybe it's too early to tell, but what sort of impact can we expect that to have in the enterprise or in the small business? Or can we expect that kind of technology to make its way into there? And how is that changing people's expectations of how they communicate and how they use technology today?
Yeah, great question. So I think we're probably about a year out. G4S is personally investing in some stuff around building the next generation connected officer, and we're going to be doing some really neat things around threaded chatbot conversations with a virtual partner or virtual officer. So it's coming fast. A lot of people have been looking at it. I'd say in probably the next year or 2 years, we'll see some stuff. There's some interesting thing that happens on the law enforcement side today where there's some virtual partners. So to answer your question, it's coming fast, next year and a half, 2 years. I think it's going to deliver a tremendous amount of efficiencies and automations. I think, and what I mean by that is efficiencies, cost savings, automations. if you can augment the traditional person that sits inside of a security operations center and repurpose him or her to go do something more strategic for the organization, and you can have a chatbot answering questions, something as simple as, if we look on the law enforcement side, or even the physical security side, of a security officer walking around and seeing a car that could be parked wrong, and you said, run license plates, hey security, run license plate ABC123, and it's going to go back and it's going to query an enterprise system that's going to tell you who owns that vehicle. So that right there, automation, efficiency, cost savings, you don't have to have somebody else on the back end responding to those things. So I think it's pretty early for that. Probably when we start to see it mainstream, 2-5 years, it's going to be a bit, but really excited about some of the transformation that's going to bring to the industry.
Okay, great. Are there any new technologies that integrators should be investing in or researching more for their clients' expectations in the future, be those drones or robotics or any of this new home automation stuff that's really starting to hit now?
Yeah, so if we go back to, I'll just pull up the quick slide that I had here. So 3 dimensions of disruption. If we focus on just the emerging technologies, here's a good area to start. AI, so understand artificial intelligence, understand advanced robotics, which could be robots and drones, understand augmented reality and Internet of Things. As I mentioned earlier, I probably have a list of 20. These were probably the top 5 that I thought made the most sense. Blockchain, I kind of put up top, this is in no order of importance, but blockchain, because it helps you understand the different things that are going to be disrupted in the future. There's more and more what they call altcoins, or different types of projects that are spinning out of these back-end blockchains that are just helping people understand the industries and helping people understand how these new ways of doing business is going to disrupt it. So those would probably be my top 5. Depending on who your customer is or what sector or subsector that the client sits in, those 5 may change, but here's a good 5 for you.
Okay, thank you. So we did get that question rephrased about some backup. So I think the question was, with so many products relying on IP or internet connectivity, what should the backup plan, maybe, if the internet is disabled or there's a power disruption or something like that, be? Like, I guess, what are the storage and backup options for IP devices?
Sure. So, I mean, a simple one, if I looked at the physical side of the question, is do some type of UP, try to do everything as PoE as possible, and battery. Always look at it from the hardware side. And all of this obviously all falls in, underneath 2 different categories, your BCP and DR plan. So make sure you always have a business continuity plan and you have a disaster recovery plan. If this happens, what are you going to do? If this fails, what are you gonna do? And then more importantly, exercise it and test it annually or during preventative maintenance visits, things like that. So kind of a general question. I think definitely look at, buy some stuff, IoT, buy some stuff that's resilient. Even around the sensors itself, don't rely on one sensor, create an ecosystem or a mesh system of multiple devices or multiple sensors that send data back, so you're not just relying on one. So there's a couple physical kind of redundancies, some software redundancies, but overall, make sure it ties into a BCP and a DR plan.
Okay, great, thank you. If anybody wants to ask a question, now would be the time. We're almost at the 3 o'clock mark, so you might have time to get a question in quickly. Maybe we can just very quickly look at the influence of, maybe this is too big a question, but the influence of DIY home security tools and how that's altering our perception of enterprise. When you can walk into a Best Buy or a Costco and you can get a pretty comprehensive system today, how is that changing the perceptions of how security should be implemented in the business?
Yeah, so a few different things. That's where I talked about the availability and the knowledge, probably the 2 important ones. So understand what does your client see when him or her walks into the local electronics store? What types of devices are they going to be exposed to, so you can have the conversation, guide them and give them knowledge of the underlying things that they don't know, right? They don't know what they don't know, and your job is to kind of teach them those things that they don't know. So they don't understand all the different cyber and security related things and the implementation stuff that goes in behind the scenes. They just see that, hey, I have this quickly available type of widget that I could buy from the store and I could put in at my home. Why can't I do it at the business? So knowledge, educate them. Availability, like I said, one of the probably biggest challenges that we see is make yourself available. Why should the end user pick up the phone and call you versus I'm just going to call Amazon, talk to their pro services team and order some stuff and have it shipped, or even have somebody from Amazon Pro Services come put it in, or Best Buy Geek Squad, or whatever it might be. Sell value, don't sell widgets, because at the end of the day, if you're selling widgets, you will easily be displaced and you will never keep up with the pricing that Amazon is forcing manufacturers to meet. So demand, availability, pricing, understand your knowledge, and just make yourself available.
Great, perfect. We're at 3 o'clock, so unfortunately it's time to wrap up, but I would like to thank Joe very much for his expertise and his time today. I'd like to, of course, thank G4S for their sponsorship and their support of this webinar. And most of all, I'd like to thank all of our attendees for joining us today. We hope this has been useful knowledge for you, and hopefully we'll see you again in the future. So everybody take care.